My son splattered scalding coffee across my shirt, barking, "You're too old to answer me properly." Then he laughed, waiting for me to crumble. Instead, I quietly dabbed my face, slipped a hand into my pocket, and pulled out something that drained the color from his cheeks. He hadn't seen that coming. But before we go further, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment letting us know where you're listening from. The number hit me like a blow. $50,000. Then Lester corrected himself. 500,000. $500,000 for his newest. Brilliant idea! Dad, I need $500,000. It's the future, an investment that can't fail. His tone carried that familiar ring of entitlement as he stalked across my living room, the soles of his designer shoes tapping against the hardwood Martha and I had refinished decades ago. I stayed seated in my old leather armchair near the fire, Churchill's biography still resting open in my lap. At 72, I'd learned the value of steady, deliberate replies. "Son, I don't have that kind of cash lying around." Lester froze mid-stride, his sharp features tightening with irritation. He raked a hand through thinning hair, my side of the family's gift, though he'd never admit it. "What do you mean you don't have it? You sold your real estate company for millions. That money is invested. Spread out. It's not sitting in a checking account, waiting for your next big gamble." I kept my voice calm, watching his frustration gather like storm clouds. "Then liquidate some of it. Dad, this app will change food delivery forever, AI-driven routes, predictive ordering. It's the future." His hands carved frantic shapes in the air, sketching invisible screens only he could see. "Investors are lined up, but I need seed money to prove commitment." The fire snapped and hissed between us, throwing restless shadows on the walls. Shadows that reminded me of winters past when this room radiated warmth instead of tension. "Lester, your track record with investments. Don't." His fingers stabbed the air like a weapon. "Don't drag up my failures. This is different. This is my breakthrough." Breakthrough. As if his comfortable suburban life with Victoria had been some kind of cage. As if the private schooling, the cars, the help with his townhouse down payment, none of it counted because his third venture had collapsed. "I know you're passionate, but I can't put everything at risk." "Then sell this house." He cut me off, words sharp, deliberate. "It's too big for you. You rattle around in here like a ghost. Get yourself a nice condo. Maybe one of those retirement places with activities." The room went still, save for the soft hiss of burning oak. My jaw clenched. My hands tightened on the leather cover of my book. "This house is my home. I built my life here with your mother. She's been gone 5 years, Dad. 5 years." His voice climbed, bouncing against the high ceiling. "You can't live in a mausoleum forever. Be practical. The market's booming. You could clear $1 million easily, probably more. $1 million easily." As if the kitchen where Martha taught him to flip pancakes was just square footage. As if the backyard where we'd thrown baseballs was nothing more than a plot of land with a market value. "I'm not selling this house, Lester." Something shifted in his face then. Disappointment hardening into contempt. "You're too old. Too stubborn to understand real business. While you cling to dusty memories, real opportunities are passing by." He snatched his coat from the sofa, jerky movements betraying his anger. "Victoria was right. You're impossible to reason with." The front door slammed so hard the frames on the mantel rattled. Through the bay window, I watched his BMW's headlights sweep across the snowy driveway before vanishing into the January night. I sat listening to the silence, the fire's warmth unable to melt the chill his words had left. The clock on the mantel ticked past 8:30. Marking the end of what I'd hoped would be a pleasant father-son visit. Instead, I'd been forced to see clearly what I'd been denying for months, the cold, calculating gaze of a man who saw his father not as family, but as an obstacle. The biography slid from my lap as I leaned back, suddenly aware of every one of my 72 years. The empty whiskey glass on the side table caught the last glow of the dying fire. With stiff joints, I pushed myself up and crossed into the library, switching on the brass lamp Martha had given me for our 20th anniversary. Warm light spilled across oak shelves lined with first editions and family photographs. This had always been my refuge, the room where decisions were made, where I built businesses, where I pondered life's great turns. Now it was the only place that still felt like mine. The photo album sat in its familiar place on the shelf, thick with memories and wrapped in leather worn smooth by years of turning hands. I lifted it down carefully, feeling its old weight, and carried it to the burgundy chair by the window. The first page opened to Lester at 3 years old, gap-toothed and grinning as he staggered through his first steps across this very library floor. Below, Martha's handwriting in white ink, March 15, 1993. Our boy is walking. I could almost hear her laughter ringing in the room again. I turned the page slowly, reverently. Lester at 5, straddling his first bicycle in the driveway. My hand steadied the bike's edge, just barely visible in the corner. He'd been so determined to ride without training wheels, frustration turning to triumph the moment he found his balance. "Daddy, I want to be just like you." His little voice still seemed to echo from the picture. My fingers drifted to another photo, our fishing trip at Lake Geneva when he was 12. He'd hauled in his first bass that day, holding it up proudly while I grinned behind him. We'd spent hours out on that boat, talking about nothing and everything. The kind of conversation fathers and sons share when the world feels exactly right. The scotch on the side table remained untouched as I continued through the pages. High school graduation, Lester in cap and gown, class salutatorian. College acceptance celebration at Romano's, his favorite place. Then his first job offer, his face alight with pride when he'd called to tell me. But somewhere along the line, something had shifted. When had that bright-eyed boy, who once wanted to be just like his father, turned into the man who'd stood in my living room tonight treating me like nothing more than a bank account? Near the back, I found the wedding photos. Lester looked sharp in his tuxedo, Victoria radiant in white silk. Even then, I'd caught something calculating in her smile, though I told myself it was just nerves. Martha had whispered, "She'll be good for him, Eldon. She'll help him focus." Focus? Yes, Victoria had certainly taught him to focus. On money, status, and what an inheritance might buy. The pages grew heavier the further I went. Fewer photos, shorter visits, conversations that revolved less around family and more around markets, investments, and opportunities. When had I become the bank of Dad, instead of simply Dad? I closed the album gently but couldn't return it to the shelf. Instead, I held it against my chest, feeling the weight of love and hope pressed into those images, dreams that seemed to have dissolved somewhere between childhood innocence and adult ambition. The clock chimed 10:30, its brass pendulum gleaming in the lamplight. Outside, snow blanketed the garden where Martha and I had planted roses, where we'd once imagined grandchildren playing someday. Where had I gone wrong? When had my boy become this stranger who saw my home as nothing more than an asset to be sold? I poured 2 fingers of Macallan, the amber glow catching the firelight. The scotch burned going down, warming me as I sat among the ghosts of better days, wondering if the son I'd raised with such love still lived somewhere beneath the man who had walked out my door tonight. Morning light crept through the kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the floor as I measured coffee grounds with the precision of habit. Grinding, measuring, brewing, the ritual anchored me after sleep had finally claimed me around 2 in the morning. The machine sputtered to life while I stood at the window, watching cardinals peck at the seed I'd scattered yesterday. Snow capped the bird bath Martha had placed just so, creating what she used to call her winter postcard view. Steam curled from my mug as I sat at the kitchen table, the place where I'd eaten thousands of meals, read newspapers, and made the biggest decisions of my life. But this morning felt different, sharpened by the clarity that often follows a night of hard reflection. When had Lester truly changed? The question had circled my mind endlessly. The wedding, that was the turning point. Looking back now, I could see it with painful honesty. After the honeymoon, Victoria's influence began reshaping his priorities, like water slowly eroding stone. At first it was subtle, missed Sunday dinners, shorter phone calls. Then sharper words, "Dad, you just don't understand the modern world." I could still see Victoria's approving smile as he said it last Christmas, her manicured hand resting possessively on his arm. I walked to the oak secretary desk Martha had inherited from her grandmother and pulled open the bottom drawer. Inside was a shoebox tied with a blue ribbon, Martha's touch. Lester's college letters lay bundled inside. His handwriting had been careful then, eager. "Dear Dad, thank you for the tuition check. I know you're sacrificing for my education, and I promise to make you proud. I can't wait to work alongside you in the business someday." Work alongside me. When had that dream withered? When had the hope of partnership shifted into replacement, then into rejection? The unraveling hadn't happened all at once. It had been slow, deliberate, a steady erosion of respect and closeness, cultivated by a woman who viewed my years of work as her future security. Victoria's quiet complaints about my interference in their marriage. Her hints that I was too involved in Lester's business choices. Her carefully measured campaign to recast me, in his eyes, from ally to obstacle. The coffee in my cup had gone cold, though I hardly noticed. Puzzle pieces I'd refused to arrange for years were finally snapping into place. The dwindling phone calls that arrived only when money was needed. Birthday visits that felt more like duties than celebrations. The calculating way Lester's eyes lingered on me, not as a son greeting his father, but as an investor evaluating assets. When had money replaced love? The clock in the kitchen read nearly 9. Across town, I imagined Lester and Victoria discussing their next move, plotting how to convince the stubborn old man to unlock his wealth for their benefit. The thought should have stung more than it did. Instead, something else took root inside me, a steely resolve I hadn't felt since my earliest years in real estate. Back then, rivals had underestimated the quiet man with the steady smile. I'd built everything through patience, strategy, and endurance. I'd survived downturns that had broken stronger men. Perhaps it was time my son remembered that his father hadn't built an empire by being naive. The phone rang, jolting me. Lester's number. For a moment, I considered letting it pass to voicemail. Instead, I answered on the 4th ring. "Hello, son." "Dad." His voice carried none of last night's sharpness, only the polished charm he'd refined over recent years. "I wanted to apologize for my behavior yesterday. Victoria and I would like to take you to dinner tonight. Bella Vista, your favorite. We need to talk." 7 days of silence followed that cold January evening. A full week passed before the phone rang again. I kept my routines: morning coffee in the kitchen, afternoons in the library, evening walks through snowy streets. But beneath the familiar rhythm, my mind worked constantly, studying possibilities the way a chess player studies an opponent's moves. The call came while I was rinsing dishes after another solitary supper. Warm water and soap were oddly comforting. Lester's name flashed on the caller ID. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hello, son." "Dad." This time, his tone was measured, practiced. "I've been thinking about our conversation. Victoria and I want to take you to dinner tomorrow night. Bella Vista. We should talk." Bella Vista. The place where Martha and I had marked each anniversary. For Lester to choose it now, it felt deliberate, like every other gesture he and Victoria made. "About what exactly?" My tone stayed even, professional, the same voice I'd once used across conference tables during the toughest negotiations. "About your future, Dad. I'm worried about you living alone in that big house. We want to talk about some options, things that might make life easier for you." Options. A soft word, hiding harder truths beneath it. "All right, Lester. 7 o'clock. Perfect. I'll make the reservation." When I hung up, I stood at the kitchen window, the cordless phone still in hand, my reflection staring back at me from the dark glass. 7 days had given me time to prepare. Perhaps it was time my son realized his father was no fool. That night I chose my clothes with care, as if for an important business deal. The navy suit Martha had bought me 3 Christmases ago, the one she said made my eyes look brighter. A burgundy tie, dignified, successful without show. In the mirror I didn't see the feeble old man Lester perhaps imagined. I saw the strategist who had outmaneuvered sharper men than him. From the oak desk in my study, I retrieved a manila envelope placed there after my recent decisions. Legal documents, and something else. A reminder of just how much could be lost by underestimating me. The taxi arrived at 6:30 sharp. As Chicago's skyline grew in the window, the weight of those papers in my inside pocket steadied me. Tomorrow would bring either reconciliation or consequences. Either way, Lester was about to learn that some fathers still had teeth. Bella Vista glowed with warm lighting and soft jazz, but it couldn't disguise the tension awaiting me at table 7. Lester stood as I approached, his smile wide, rehearsed. Victoria remained seated, her makeup perfect, her wave as polished as one of her online videos. "Dad, you look wonderful." Lester's embrace felt staged, meant for the eyes of strangers in the restaurant, not for me. I took the chair they'd chosen for me, facing the wall, while they commanded the view of the entrance and the windows. Even the seating arrangement was strategic. "Victoria, you're looking well." I nodded toward her. Her phone rested face up beside her water glass, screen lit, ready. "Oh, Eldon, we're so glad you agreed to meet." Her voice carried that syrupy politeness she'd perfected for uncomfortable moments. "We've been so very worried about you." Worried. There it was again, the same rehearsed vocabulary Lester had used on the phone. Their lines were clearly coordinated, their roles assigned in advance. The waiter appeared to take our drink orders. Wine for them, water for me. I'd learned long ago that serious negotiations demanded a clear head. Once he left, Lester leaned forward, adopting what he must have believed was a look of fatherly concern. "Dad, Victoria and I have been talking about your situation. Living all alone in that big house, no one close by if something were to happen." "Nothing has happened, son." My voice stayed calm, though my hand brushed against the envelope tucked inside my jacket, steadying me. "I'm more than capable." "Are you, though?" Victoria's voice sliced in, followed by a brittle laugh that rang like shattering glass. "Honestly, Eldon, when was your last thorough checkup?" "You're 72. 72. She spoke the number like it was a final verdict. Her phone angled slightly, as though she was recording me for later use. That's when Lester reached under the table and produced a leather briefcase I hadn't noticed. The sharp metallic snaps as he opened it were deafening in the cozy restaurant. "We've found the answer," he declared, laying down a neat stack of papers as though performing a magician's trick. "Sunset Haven. Private suites, full medical staff, daily programs, everything you need." The name landed like a blow. Sunset Haven, a nursing home. I lifted the top sheet, my hands steady even as my chest rattled like a fault line about to split. "We've already handled most of the arrangements," Victoria said brightly, as if she were doing me a favor. "Normally, admission takes weeks. But we've expedited it. You could be settled in by Friday." Friday. 3 days. I read each page with the same attention I'd once given multimillion-dollar deals. Health assessments. Financial authorizations. Adjustments to my living will. Spaces for my signature everywhere, and there's already in place wherever family consent was required. "You've been thorough," I said at last, my voice sounding distant even to me. "We just want what's best for you, Dad," Lester said, patient, patronizing, as though speaking to a child. "That house is too much. The proceeds from selling it will give you top-notch care for the rest of your life." The rest of my life. Efficiently scripted, neatly packaged. My home liquidated, my independence erased, my wealth placed in the hands of family whose sudden compassion aligned suspiciously well with financial gain. "I'm not going anywhere," I said softly, laying the documents face down on the linen tablecloth. Victoria laughed, a tinkling sound that carried an edge. "Oh, Eldon, don't be difficult. It's already set in motion. I will not allow you to dictate my life." My words came out stronger than I expected, sharp enough to turn nearby heads. Lester's smile faltered. His practiced composure fractured like thin ice. Control your life? He leaned forward, voice rising. Look at you. You can barely hold a simple conversation without getting flustered. I'm not confused about anything, son. With deliberate calm, I slid the nursing home papers back across the table toward him. I know exactly what this is. Victoria's phone lifted a little higher, its camera catching the candlelight, her lips curling in anticipation, a predator ready to pounce on a wounded creature. Lester's coffee cup sat before him, steam drifting upward. His hand gripped the handle with white-knuckled pressure. You want proof you can't take care of yourself? His tone had changed, raw, dangerous, unrecognizable. My son sounded like a stranger. Fine. Here's your proof. He moved suddenly, the cup arcing upward. The liquid caught the candlelight in a shimmering brown curve before splashing across my face and chest. The burn wasn't searing, but sharp enough to make me flinch. Hot coffee slid down my cheek, soaking into my burgundy tie and navy jacket. Droplets dotted the white linen like clues at a crime scene. Look! Lester slammed the emptied cup onto its saucer, the porcelain cracking under the force. I just drenched you in coffee, and you're too frail to even react. You just sit there useless like a child. Victoria's delighted laugh sliced through the shocked stillness. Exactly. He can't even defend himself. This is proof of his decline. All around us, the restaurant froze. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Waiters stood motionless, plates balanced midair. At the next table, a woman covered her mouth in horror while her companion fumbled for his phone. Whether to summon help or capture the humiliation, I couldn't tell. I reached for my napkin, every movement slow, deliberate, mechanical. The starched linen absorbed the coffee dripping down my cheek while my mind caught up with what had just happened. My son. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike. The man whose tuition I'd paid, whose failures I had forgiven time and again. That son had just degraded me in public, not to hurt me, but to prove I was weak. The stains bloomed across my shirt like black flowers racing into full bloom. The sharp aroma of coffee tangled with Victoria's perfume and the restaurant's garlicky air. I folded the ruined napkin with precise care, edges aligned perfectly, and placed it beside my untouched water glass. Lester leaned back, chest heaving with the savage pride of a man who believed he'd won. There. Now everyone sees it. An old man who can't protect himself from the smallest accident. Victoria nodded eagerly, phone raised high now, recording openly. This will be perfect for the evaluation, undeniable evidence of diminished ability. The maitre d' approached carefully, posture stiff but face troubled. Sir, is everything all right? Do you need us to? Everything's fine, I said, my voice calm but carrying through the unnatural hush. Just a family matter that got a little heated. Inside my jacket, my fingers brushed against crisp documents, papers forged by 7 decades of foresight and planning. Proof that some fathers still carried sharper teeth than their children ever imagined. Coffee stains marked my shirt like medals of betrayal, but my hands remained steady as I stood, every eye in Bella Vista fixed on me. Lester's expression brimmed with vicious satisfaction. Victoria held her phone like a weapon, anticipating my collapse. Instead, I drew out a slip of paper, smooth, pristine, catching the candlelight. A check. $1 million, written in my own careful hand 3 days earlier. Paid to the order of Lester Dean, I said, my words ringing clear across the room. Prepared for your new business venture. Written before I realized what you've become. Lester's arrogance strained from his face, replaced by raw hunger. His eyes clung to the check as though it were a life raft. Dad, what are you? But now I see you don't deserve it. The first tear came clean, right down the middle, severing the inked numbers with surgical precision. You threw scalding coffee on your father to prove he was helpless. No, wait, stop. Lester lunged forward, his chair shrieking across the floor. His hands clawed at the air, desperate. I held the halves just out of reach, Victoria's phone slipped from her fingers, clattering against the hardwood, her thirst for spectacle forgotten in the face of disappearing wealth. Eldon, please, we can talk. We'll fix this. The second tear cut crosswise. 4 neat quarters drifted down onto the white tablecloth like autumn leaves falling to earth. Each piece carried a fragment of the fortune that would never be theirs. Too late, I said. You chose your side the moment you decided I was nothing but an obstacle to your inheritance. I scattered the shreds across the table, a mosaic of shattered opportunity. You plotted to sell my home. To lock me away. To humiliate me before strangers. Lester clawed at the fragments like a child desperate to fix a broken toy. We can tape it back together. Banks will honor reconstructed checks. Not checks that never existed. I dabbed the last droplet of coffee from my cheek, then placed the folded napkin aside with quiet finality. Goodbye, son. The maitre d' stepped back, bowing slightly, as I walked past. My stride was steady, measured, unbroken, 72 years of life heavy on my shoulders, but dignity firmly intact. Behind me, I caught Victoria's sharp hiss and Lester's frantic muttering, already scheming their next move in a battle they'd begun but could never truly win. The Chicago night air cooled my face as I stepped out onto the sidewalk, leaving behind not just a restaurant, but a bond that had died the moment my son chose greed over loyalty. In my jacket pocket, the real documents rested safely. Proof that tonight's display was not the end, but merely the opening lesson. Some fathers guide with a gentle hand. Others must teach through harder truths, about respect, dignity, and the cost of betrayal. My son's real schooling was only beginning. March arrived carrying hints of spring, though winter's chills still haunted Chicago's mornings. 3 weeks had slipped by since the restaurant incident. 3 weeks of uneasy quiet that felt less like peace and more like the calm before a storm. I was in the middle of my morning coffee ritual when the doorbell chimed. Through the peephole stood Mrs. Henderson from 2 doors down, clutching her mail, posture taut with the energy of someone bringing tidings. Good morning, Eldon. Her smile was that familiar neighborhood blend, part concern, part curiosity. I hope you don't mind me stopping by, but I've heard some troubling things. The coffee maker sputtered behind me as I ushered her only as far as the foyer, keeping her from wandering deeper. What sort of things, Dorothy? She shifted uneasily. Well, people are saying you might be having some health problems. Memory lapses, maybe? Folks are worried about you living here alone. Memory problems. So the campaign had begun. I appreciate the concern, I said evenly, but I feel fine. My mind is clear as ever. Relief softened her features, though only briefly. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. But you are keeping up with your medications, aren't you? Medications I'd never been prescribed, for ailments I didn't have. Their strategy was cleverer than I'd expected. After Dorothy left, the phone started ringing, and didn't stop. Eldon, it's Frank Morrison, from the association, came the familiar voice. Concern draped in professional courtesy. I got a call from your son yesterday. He said you've been struggling with your finances. Asked if I knew anyone who could help with elder planning. I clenched the phone tighter. Frank and I had worked together for 2 decades. Lester called you directly? Yes, he sounded genuinely worried. Said you'd been forgetting to pay bills, getting mixed up with statements. I told him you'd always been sharp as a tack, but... His pause hung heavy. Well, people do change with age. Nothing wrong with needing help. 3 more calls followed, all echoing the same script. Different voices, same message. Lester had reached out to each of them separately, weaving stories of my supposed decline. By mid-afternoon, the pattern was clear, a coordinated campaign, meant to create a chorus of concern, loud enough to justify legal action. I opened my laptop, an action that itself contradicted their claim of my technological incompetence, and searched Victoria's social media. What I found was a masterpiece of manipulation. Facebook posts about the challenges of caring for aging parents. Instagram stories about what to do when loved ones refuse help. carefully staged narratives painting her as a devoted daughter-in-law burdened by an obstinate old man blind to his own decline. The comments revealed the brilliance of the scheme. Sympathy poured in. Strangers and friends alike shared their own stories, reinforcing the image she'd crafted. So heartbreaking when they lose insight into their own condition. Guardianship might be the only way to protect him. You're doing the right thing, it's never easy. Each comment stacked on the last, constructing a digital monument to my alleged incompetence. Victoria hadn't just attacked me, she'd crowdsourced my destruction, transforming social media into a weapon aimed squarely at my dignity. I began taking screenshots, methodical, precise, while the phone rang again and again. 17 calls by nightfall. 6 carefully curated posts. A clear map of their strategy, build a record of concern, gather witnesses, prepare justification for the nursing home scheme they'd hinted at in Bella Vista. But in their arrogance, they'd made a fatal mistake. They assumed I was already the helpless man they were portraying, too weak to see through it, too feeble to fight back. I reached for my phone, dialing my attorney while I organized the growing stack of evidence. Some wars are fought with guns. Some battles demand more than resolve, they demand strategy, records, and the precise use of legal expertise. The offices of Peterson, Clean and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a sleek Chicago tower, their mahogany-paneled conference room offering a broad view of Lake Michigan's gray expanse. I laid out my evidence across the polished table as my attorney, Sarah Peterson, examined each page with careful, practiced scrutiny. Elder abuse statutes are straightforward, Eldon, she said, adjusting her glasses as she studied Victoria's social media posts. Defamation, harassment, attempted financial exploitation. Your son and daughter-in-law have built quite the case against themselves. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Lester and Victoria schemed to paint me incompetent, they'd been documenting their own misconduct. But their campaign was far from over. That afternoon, a call came from Citizens Bank's security office. Mr. Dean, this concerns your son's visit yesterday. He identified himself as your caregiver and claimed you were suffering from dementia. He attempted to access your accounts. So Lester had taken the next step, testing whether his public lies could override security measures. The attempt failed. My accounts, fortified decades earlier with safeguards, remained untouched. But the escalation was clear. 2 days later, a knock at my door revealed a new front in the war. Mr. Dean, I'm Jennifer Walsh, Chicago Department of Aging Services, said a young woman in business attire, tablet in hand. Her expression carried the calm professionalism of someone used to difficult visits. We've received reports about possible cognitive decline, missed medications, and concerns about your safety living alone. I'm here to perform a welfare assessment. I welcomed her inside, recognizing this inspection for what it was. Another battlefield. For 2 hours she tested me: memory recall, reasoning, financial knowledge, medication awareness, home safety. Each task I handled with the clarity of a man who managed real estate portfolios and businesses for 4 decades. Typing steadily into her tablet, she concluded. Mr. Dean demonstrates excellent cognitive health, maintains his home responsibly, and shows complete understanding of his financial affairs. No evidence supports the reported concerns. Next came the medical exam, orchestrated by Lester's attorney but conducted by Dr. Martinez, my physician of 15 years. The man who'd walked with me through pneumonia, Martha's cancer, and the natural tests of age. His report was unequivocal. Physically strong for 72. Cognitively sharp. No signs of dementia. Fully capable of independent living and financial management. Each professional opinion reinforced my position and undermined theirs. But Victoria doubled down. Her online presence grew more theatrical. Heartbroken after another failed attempt to help Dad. When seniors fool professionals, families feel powerless. Elder care is broken. She reframed every defeat as proof the system itself was failing. Her victim narrative endured, layered with hashtags about family struggles and desperate pleas for advice. Sympathy poured in, keeping her fabricated story alive. Meanwhile, Lester burned through 3 different law offices, searching for anyone willing to file guardianship papers without credible evidence. Each meeting cost him money he didn't have. Each rejection left him angrier. But frustration made them reckless. One evening, I caught a fragment of their conversation, captured legally when they retrieved Victoria's forgotten purse from my property. "You'll regret fighting us," Lester hissed. Victoria's reply chilled me more than his threat. "Social media is just the start. If the courts won't help, we'll find other ways to make his life unbearable." That night I sat in my library, surrounded by neatly organized files, records of failed attacks, medical reports, bank security notes, screenshots of their smear campaign. The evidence showed I was competent, my assets untouchable, their legal arguments weak. But Victoria's words told me something darker. They were preparing to abandon legal pretense altogether. I opened my safe, retrieving documents I had hoped never to use. If they wanted war beyond law and reason, they'd learn quickly that not all old men are defenseless. Some carry sharper teeth than their years suggest. The next afternoon, sunlight poured through Peterson, Clean and Associates' tall windows, glinting off the polished conference table. My files were neatly spread across its surface as Sarah Peterson reviewed the updated paperwork with her trademark precision. "Are you certain about this step, Mr. Dean?" she asked, her glasses catching the light as she looked up from the revised will. "Once completed, a full disinheritance cannot be undone." "Yes," I said firmly, aligning the stack of papers with deliberate precision. "I'm absolutely certain. My son has revealed his true nature through months of calculated harassment. These documents are proof." Sarah gave a quiet nod and turned back to the file I had assembled, screenshots of Victoria's slanderous posts, transcripts of Lester's threatening calls, sworn statements from neighbors about their intimidation tactics, plus the medical and social service reports affirming my full competency. "This is exhaustive," she murmured, flipping through the bank's security notes on Lester's failed attempt to seize my accounts. "Together with the collapsed guardianship petitions, you have a rock-solid foundation for disinheritance." 2 hours later, in the presence of 2 witnesses, I signed my new will. With each stroke of the pen, Lester's name vanished from my estate, replaced by organizations that would use my wealth to build rather than destroy: the Chicago Children's Education Foundation, the Elder Care Advocacy Group, and the Harold Washington Library Fund. The papers felt heavier than their weight as I slid them into my briefcase. 72 years of life distilled into wisdom and the bitter recognition that sometimes a child becomes a stranger wearing a familiar face. That evening, from the same study where I had once mapped out Lester's college plans and dreamed of our future working side by side, I dialed his number. "Dad?" His voice carried a tentative optimism, the sound of a man convinced my defenses had finally cracked. "Son," I replied evenly, careful to lace my tone with neither warmth nor hostility. "I've been reflecting on everything. I want to talk about our future, completely honestly." A rush of relief poured into his response. "I knew you'd come around eventually. Victoria kept saying you were just being stubborn, but I told her you'd see sense." Old man. Even in his supposed triumph, he couldn't resist the casual cruelty that had become his signature. "I have something for you," I continued, resting a hand on the briefcase that now held copies of the new will. "Let's meet tomorrow night at Bella Vista. 7 o'clock. Time to settle everything between us once and for all." "Bella Vista," he repeated, satisfaction in his voice. "Perfect. Same place we had our misunderstanding. Very symbolic." "Misunderstanding." His tidy word for throwing coffee in my face while trying to bully me into a nursing home. "Bring Victoria," I added. "She should be part of this conversation." After the call, I sat in the fading twilight, surrounded by shelves of books and memories that had steadied me during these months of warfare. Tomorrow would end this struggle permanently. Unlike Lester's crude attacks, my resolution would be anchored in law, evidence, and the strategic discipline that had defined my success long before he was born. From the safe, I retrieved one final envelope. More than papers, it was the distilled weight of paternal disappointment, reshaped into decisive action. Some lessons are taught gently, with patience. Others demand the swift and final edge of consequence, unyielding, undeniable, and absolute. Bella Vista greeted me with its familiar glow, soft jazz humming beneath warm lighting. But this time I crossed its dining room not with hope, but armed with truth. The maitre d' guided me to table 7, the same spot where my son had humiliated me 3 months earlier. Lester and Victoria were already there, expectant, dressed as though for a celebration. Lester in his finest suit, Victoria adorned in jewelry likely bought with money I once gave freely. "Dad, you look fantastic." Lester rose, arms open in a performance of affection that almost rang true. "I'm so glad we can finally put all this behind us." Victoria's smile glowed beside him, her phone discreetly angled to capture what she no doubt intended to present as their great triumph over the obstinate old man. I set the folder on the table between us with the same deliberate care I once reserved for signing multimillion-dollar property contracts. "I promise you a surprise," I said evenly. "Here it is." The first document I drew out was a copy of my newly executed will, stamped with the seal of Peterson, Clean, and Associates, dated only the day before. I slid it across to Lester, watching his eager expression stiffen as he reached the clause that removed him entirely. This can't be real." His voice cracked under the strain. "You can't do this to me." "I already have," I replied, steady and unflinching. From the folder came the second stack, the record of their harassment campaign, meticulously catalogued over months. Social media screenshots, transcripts of Lester's threatening calls, statements from neighbors, bank records, every deception laid bare in stark black ink. Victoria's face drained as she recognized her own posts, each falsehood time-stamped, annotated, cross-referenced. Her carefully staged victim narrative reduced to evidence in a legal file. "We'll fight this in court," she shrieked, loud enough to turn nearby heads. "You're clearly not competent to make these choices." I smiled for the first time that night, opening the final section. "With what evidence?" "These medical evaluations confirming my full mental capacity. These social service reports finding no cause for concern? Or perhaps these bank security records showing Lester's failed attempts at fraud?" One by one, I laid them down: medical reports, legal evaluations, transcripts of threats, every page another nail sealing their coffin. Lester seized the will, rifling through pages as if a loophole might magically appear. The Children's Education Foundation? The Elder Care Advocacy Group? You're leaving everything to strangers instead of your own son? I'm leaving it to organizations that lift people up instead of tearing them down, I said calmly, leaning back with a sense of release I hadn't felt in months. Groups that understand the difference between genuine care and calculated manipulation. Victoria's composure crumbled. "This is madness. We were your family. We were trying to help you. By declaring me incompetent? By spreading lies about my mind? By trying to shove me into a nursing home to seize my house?" I asked, my voice steady, never raised. I gathered the papers with methodical care. Help doesn't come dressed as humiliation and theft. The evidence was airtight, the product of months of precise documentation, the kind of defense only a man seasoned by decades of business battles could prepare. Lester's face twisted through disbelief, rage, desperation, and finally the hollow bargaining of a man cornered. "Dad, please, we can make this right. I'll change. Victoria will apologize. Just give us one more chance. You've already shown me who you are," I said, rising from the table and leaving the documents scattered like ruins of their ambitions. "Goodbye, Lester. Goodbye, Victoria." Behind me came Victoria's sobs, sharp and hysterical, and Lester's frantic whispering about appeals and lawyers, the last gasps of greed masquerading as love. Outside, the Chicago spring air felt brisk, almost cleansing. 3 months later, I sat in the children's corner of the Harold Washington Library, surrounded by a half-circle of bright eyes and eager smiles as I turned the pages of Where the Wild Things Are. Golden June light spilled through the tall windows, warming the little reading nook that had become my weekly sanctuary. "Mr. Dean, will you read another one?" asked Sophie, a 6-year-old with pigtails and a wide, gap-toothed grin. Of course, sweetheart. Which one shall we do next? Their joy was contagious, their affection untainted by obligation or expectation. These afternoons had become the highlight of my week, living proof that real relationships could be built on laughter and kindness, not manipulation. When the last child was collected by their parents, I walked 3 blocks to Romano's Cafe, where my Tuesday lunch group was already gathered, waiting with easy smiles and genuine companionship. Frank Morrison motioned me toward our usual spot by the window. Eldon, you're looking better every time I see you. Retirement suits you, added Margaret Chen, a former teacher whose smile carried genuine warmth. Not retirement, I corrected with a small grin as I settled into my chair. Freedom. We spoke about books we'd read, flowers blooming in our gardens, and the upcoming library fundraiser, where my contribution would launch a new children's reading program. Simple conversations, free of pretense, shared among people who valued one another without hidden motives or financial expectations. Later that day, I worked in the garden, pruning Martha's roses and tying up the tomato vines she had planted years ago. The house, once heavy with silence, now thrummed with life, friends dropping by for coffee, neighbors borrowing novels from my shelves, laughter echoing in rooms that had once felt empty. On my desk inside, a stack of letters waited. Thank you notes from the organizations I'd supported. Each one described how the funds were being used: scholarships for children who never thought college possible, grants fueling medical research, elder advocacy programs shielding seniors from the very kind of exploitation Lester and Victoria had tried to inflict. One letter stood out, a young woman writing to say her tuition had been fully covered by the Education Foundation. Her gratitude was vivid, heartfelt, describing how the scholarship had altered her family's future. That was legacy. Not the entitled inheritance my son had demanded, but hope and opportunity shaping lives that truly needed them. As the evening settled in, I sat in my library with a cup of tea and a biography I'd been savoring. The phone stayed mercifully quiet. No desperate pleas from Lester, no threats from Victoria, only the ticking of the mantel clock and the soft sound of pages turning. Through the window, I caught sight of Mrs. Henderson tending her roses next door. She waved, and I waved back. Just a neighbor, just a friend. No manipulation, no obligation, only simple kindness. The legal documents in my safe remained untouched, their purpose fulfilled without ever being needed. Sometimes the truest victories come quietly, when people reveal their own downfall through the choices they make. It had taken me 72 years to understand, family is more than blood, love requires respect, and some bonds, no matter their history, are too poisonous to preserve. The hardest lesson was realizing that self-protection can mean letting go of people you once loved. Yet in cutting away that poison, I had made space for what truly mattered: friendships that gave rather than drained, community built on respect rather than calculation, belonging that came not from obligation but from choice. The summer night stretched before me, filled with small joys and steady peace, the kind of wealth money could never purchase, but hard-earned wisdom had finally granted. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.